I am Sibi Saji, a child protection worker at Catholic Children's Aid Society of Toronto, and I'm truly honored to be your host today on behalf of the Malayali Association of Social Workers in Ontario. This is a 1 hour webinar designed as an introduction to 2SLGBTQIA plus identities with an emphasis on understanding the terminologies, unpacking some common stereotypes and myths, and exploring the identity through an intersectional lens. Before we begin, I want to thank each one of you for taking the time to join us on this meaningful occasion. We hope today's session will be a space for reflection, connection, and shared learning. To begin, it's important to ground ourselves in the spirit of truth and reconciliation. I now invite Lindsay Francis to deliver the land acknowledgement. She is a clinical counselor at Family Services Thames Valley, London. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you, Sibi. Good morning, everyone. As we gather virtually today from across Ontario to celebrate Pride Month, we begin by acknowledging that the land we are on is the traditional territory of many nations. These include the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, the Mississaugas of the Credit, and other diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who have lived on and cared for this land since time immemorial. We honor the enduring presence, wisdom, and contributions of Indigenous peoples, and we recognize that Ontario is covered by many treaties, including Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties. As settlers, including those of us who are part of the Malayali diaspora, we reflect on our responsibilities to learn from and stand in solidarity with Indigenous communities in their ongoing efforts for truth, justice, and reconciliation. Let this acknowledgement be more than words. Let it inspire action, humility, and a deep respect for the Indigenous peoples whose land we are now living and working on. Miigwech, Nani, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay, for reminding us of the deep connections Indigenous peoples hold with this land. Up next, let's welcome Siju Simon, a seasoned social worker with over 20 years of rich work experience. He has held key positions in the child welfare sector and retired as a director at Windsor Essex Children's Aid Society. He currently provides independent social work services in the healthcare sector. Please join me in welcoming Siju as he delivers the welcome address on behalf of MASWO.
Thank you, CB. Good morning, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to today's event, organized by the Malayali Association of Social Workers in Ontario, MASWO. As most of you know, that MASWO, with over 700 members, is the largest professional association of Malayali social workers in Canada. Today's session focuses on understanding 2SLGBTQIA plus identities, an important and timely topic as we have just celebrated the Pride Month in the month of June and reaffirm our commitment to inclusion. As social workers and community leaders, it's essential that our work is informed, respectful, and inclusive of all identities. We are honored to have with us today Mohammed Hassan, a Canadian certified inclusion professional and passionate advocate for equity and diversity. With over 15 years of experience across sectors and as a former manager of equity, diversity, and inclusion at the City of Kingston, Mohammed brings deep insight and lived experience to this conversation. As a former president of Kingston Malayali Association, I've had the pleasure of working with Mohammed during his time in Kingston for the many multicultural events Mohammed initiated as the first EDI manager of the City of Kingston. And he has been a strong ally to our Malayali community in this area. Currently, Mohammed leads national DEI work at Electricity Human Resources Canada and regularly speaks on inclusive leadership, anti-racism, and newcomer inclusion. On behalf of MASWO, I warmly welcome Mohammed and all of you who have joined us from across Ontario. Thank you for being here, and let's have a meaningful sessions together. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Siju. And now it's time for our main session. And we are so honored to have with us today Mohammed Ahsan, as Siju well versed and told us like what he's all about. I just want to add a few words about him. His facilitation style is very engaging, culturally grounded, and rooted in empathy, curiosity, and respect. He is a Canadian certified inclusion professional and a passionate advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion. He is one among us, a South Asian immigrant with over 15 years of experience across public, nonprofit, and federally funded organizations. As well said, Muhammad brings lived and professional insight to this conversation. Let's break down barriers, challenge assumptions, and build a more inclusive future together. We look forward to welcoming you to this important conversation. Take the stage, Muhammad.
Wow, thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. And um as you all know, my name is Mohammed Ahsan, and my pronouns are he and him. And I'm really honored to be facilitating this learning session today. I'm also very grateful for the invitation, and also want to recognize that this conversation should not be just limited to, excuse me, um just 1 month. So like the fact that we are doing it after the Pride Month just speaks volumes of the commitment of your organization and the people who have shown up on Saturday morning to attend this. So today we will be exploring some foundational concepts and conversation around gender, sexuality, and inclusion that are essential for social work, but also essential for our own understanding as individuals. So thank you very much for organizing this, and to each of you for showing up. So as we were already talking about that, like this is going to be a safe learning session. So let's set the tone for our learning together. So this session is going to be a judgment-free zone. You are welcome to participate however you feel comfortable. Cameras are optional. I love seeing faces, but you don't have to switch it on. And questions are also encouraged. We will be taking questions at the end. There are no silly or shameful questions here. It's a safe learning space. All I'm asking is like we all listen with respect, suspend assumptions, and if somebody is asking a question that may not be comfortable for others, it's okay. For learning, it's important that we are able to um, be able to speak our mind. So speak from a place of curiosity and empathy, and be mindful of others. If somebody is sharing their personal experience. Just because they shared in this space does not mean now they want the rest of the world to know about their experiences or their stories. So be mindful of that as well. But I already know that because you all are social workers already, so you know the confidentiality and all these elements in it. So without further ado, I'm going to just dive right into the conversation. So I'm sure all of us have heard there are many acronyms that are used, like, LGBT. When I was growing up, LGBT was the most common one, and then we heard LGBTQ, LGBTTQ, 2SLGBTQ. I once heard on a meme like LGTVQ. All of these, like organizations use differently. Federal government of Canada and certain provincial and territorial governments usually use the term SOGI, which is sexual orientation and gender identity. And I've also read in several documents GSRD as a terminology, which is gender, sexual, and relationship diversity. And different organizations choose different acronym based on their understanding and values. I normally recommend using 2SLGBTQIA plus, as it reflects a more inclusive and expensive view of gender and sexual diversity. And we especially center the 2S, the two spirit, at the beginning to honor the unique indigenous identities, worldviews, and histories that predate colonial gender norms. In Canada, placing 2S first is a meaningful act of reconciliation and respect as well. So let's unpack the acronym that I am recommending to all of us today. So the 2S, as I mentioned already, It's represent two spirit, which is a very indigenous terminology, and we will talk about that shortly. L stands for lesbians, and G, we all know most of the time G stands for gay. Bisexual is represented by B, and T is used for transgender, not transvestite or not transgendered, and I will unpack that further in later slides. Also, queer and questioning is generally used when we are talking about the term Q. I will caution all of us from the term queer, because not everyone we will come across would be comfortable with the terminology. Also, in my experience, uh, just because somebody we know identifies themselves as queer does not mean everyone who's on the spectrum of 2SLGBTQIA plus identities will be comfortable with that. It's mainly because it's been used as a slur, as an insult in past. While there's a mass movement within the community to reclaim certain terminologies, and queer is one of those terminologies. However, like not everyone will have the same type of relationship with it. I is used for intersex, and it's very recently added to the acronym mix. That does not mean that intersex identity is something new, and we will also talk about that in next few slides shortly. Asexual also is um, a sexual identity, and we will talk about all of these. So if you are not sure about the definitions, uh, just bear with me and we will talk about that. I want to also talk about the plus. That actually acknowledges that language and identities are diverse and ever expanding, and being clear on respectful, inclusive language is a cornerstone for everyone's work, especially work for all of you as social workers. So that is basically like everyone that may not be represented through any of the other acronym or alphabets words is represented through the plus sign. Now, I understand that I just said that queer is often used as in past as a slur, but it's also often used as an umbrella term that encompasses a wide range of non-heterosexual and non-cisgender identities. Um, like many in the community have reclaimed it as a powerful, inclusive, and fluid term. Under that umbrella term, L, G, and B are sexual orientation that describes who someone is emotionally, romantically, and sexually attracted to. And T represents transgender, which is a gender identity describing someone whose gender is different from the sex that is assigned to them at the time of their birth. It's not about who they are attracted to, but who they are. And I will try and focus more on the T, because most of the time when we are working with um, different identities, transitioning is one of the most common element that is very much visible in many ways, and sometimes we do confuse sexualities with gender identities. So today, to explain this further difference, I'm going to introduce to my good friend, genderbread person, which is basically a simple but powerful tool to help us understand that how these gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, sex, and gender expression, like are different. They are not same things, and each component exists on a spectrum. So let's start with the first one, which is the sex assigned at the time of the birth, which basically refers to classification of a person, um, like biologically, typically as male, female, and intersex, based on their external anatomy, internal reproductive organs, chromosomes, and hormones. Like, as most of us already know, that most people are assigned female, will have XX chromosomes, and assigned male at the time of the birth will have XY chromosome. But intersex individuals are born with physical and genetic traits that do not align with the typical definition of um, the body and biology of male and female binaries. And these natural variations can include ambiguous genitalia, mosaic chromosomal patterns like XXY, XO, and also the hormone insensitivity syndrome, which is like An example of that would be the androgen insensitivity syndrome or atypical gonadal development. Intersex traits are part of human biological diversity, and no points for guessing, but I will let you guess. What do you think is approximately the number of population um, globally that is born as intersex? Um, Three options: um, 10%, 20%, and 1.7% of the population. Like I said, there is no prize for guessing the right one, and it's very obvious. Like I gave two very obvious answers, and then 1.7% of the population is the right number, and comparable to the numbers of like it's actually very interesting to know that it's very comparable to the numbers of people with red hair. So when we talk about especially from the South Asians perspective and the history and culture, uh, gender diversity actually is including variations in sex traits. Uh, we acknowledge through the Hijra identities or the Kinnar identities, and also there is a strong social, religious, and cultural category. So while Hijras are not a synonym to intersex individuals, traditional societies in the South Asian region recognize that sex and gender diversity exists beyond binary definitions, and the arrival of colonial and uh, like more of a foreign medical systems impose rigid binary norms of being male and female, leading to medicalization and erasure of intersex identities. And today, intersex advocates call for the bodily autonomy, informed consent, and visibility in healthcare, education, and law. And it's the same in Canada as well as other parts of the world, because for a really long time, when a baby is born with ambiguous genitalia, corrective surgery was performed uh, b- by the idea was that to correct their gender or biological identity at the time of their birth. Now, how's this different from gender identity is one of the questions that most of the time we ask ourselves, especially when we don't know what uh, is gender and sexual diversity all about. So, when we talk about sex assigned at the time of the birth, it's definitely the components that we talked about. But the gender identity basically refers to a person's uh, deeply felt internal sense of their own gender and how they know themselves to be, whether as man, woman, both, neither, or something entirely different. Uh, this internal identity may or may not align with their sex assigned at the time of the birth. And its distinction from both biological sex and sexual orientation is very important to understand. So in South Asian cultures, like gender diversity, like I mentioned earlier, existed beyond the male female binaries and communities, like in some of the parts of India, like the term Aravani is also used, as well as Hijra and Kinnar. Uh, they have long reflected identities that fall outside the cisgender norms, and through modern terminologies like non-binary, gender queer, gender fluid, bigender, like they may have newer terminologies in the language. The experience of varied gender identities is not new to the region, and I want to talk about that in temple traditions, classical arts, and ancient texts. We see space of androgyny, the dual spirit deities, and gender non-conformity. Unfortunately, the colonial rule imposed very rigid gender binaries and contributed to the marginalization of these identities. So today, many South Asians, both within the subcontinent and the diaspora, are reclaiming the right to define their gender on their own terms. Respecting someone's gender identity means believing them when they tell you who they are and creating a space for their truth without judgment. speaking about gender identity, if your gender identity aligns with your sex assigned at the time of the birth, that makes you, like by definition, a cisgender person. However, if your sex assigned at the birth is not aligning with your gender identity or internal sense of how you want to identify yourself, then you will be categorized under the transgender umbrella. And we will unpack the transgender umbrella shortly. But whenever I talk about gender identity being not the same thing as the sex assigned at the time of the birth, like one big question that comes in many of our minds is that, Muhammad, this is a very Western concept. We never had that before. So I have a very quick answer for that. And the answer is, here is a screenshot of uh, a lot of third gender and trans identity in non-Western societies. And you will see, like, while there are India, Pakistan as an umbrella term of Indian subcontinent and South Asia represented, but there are terms from Latin America, Kenya, Mexico, Philippines, Ethiopia, and of course the North American indigenous term of Two-Spirit. So across many non-Western societies, there's a rich, long standing evidence of third gender and trans identities that basically challenges our understanding of the Eurocentric gender binary. Um, I already mentioned the terms like hijra, kinnar, and arvani have existed for centuries, and often occupying respected um, spiritual, cultural, and ceremonial roles. And these identities were not only recognized but often revered within local traditions. Like ancient Hindu texts like Mahabharata and the Kama Sutra illustrate this nuanced understanding of gender diversity. For instance, Mahabharata tells the story of Shikandi, born as Shikandini, who transitioned into male to fulfill a vow of revenge. And then they later plays a crucial role in Kurukshetra war, where Bhishma refused to fight him, leading to Bhishma's death. And like Shikandi stands as a powerful example of trans masculinity, like transitioning from female to a male identity, and affirmation of gender transitioning in ancient narratives also. Another example I can think of from ancient scriptures is Arjuna, who during exile, assumes the identity of uh, Birhanala, a feminine presenting dance teacher. And this transformation is portrayed not with ridicule, but with a lot of dignity, revealing how even revered warriors could embrace gender fluidity without shame or stigma. And also, Kama Sutra often reduced, for some of us, to a sexual manual. It's in fact acknowledges individuals of third nature, including men who love men, uh, uh, transgender identities of the individuals, and those who defy binary categories. And these individuals who described like who were described as part of the natural diversity of human life, and often had roles in community and the court life, and also religious and cultural rituals. And also beyond Hindu traditions, gender diversity was also integrated into Islamic South Asian society, like particularly during the Mughal era. Trans and gender diverse people, often known as hijras or khwaja sira, they held a formal and respected role in royal courts. They served as advisors, harem caretakers, educators, guards, and a lot of senior and trusted positions. And they were trusted with sensitive responsibilities because of their perceived neutrality and loyalty. Emperors like Akbar institutionalized these roles, granting them the official titles, salaries, and social respect. And this inclusive structures was, like I mentioned earlier, dramatically disrupted by British colonial rule, which imposed inclusiveness from a different lens. And they impose a Victorian idea of gender and sexuality, and they introduce a law like laws like Section 377, which was later on repealed in modern day India, and sought to erase or criminalize non-binary or queer identities. So the impact of colonization was not only felt through law and governance, but also through religious institutions. Um, um, like if we look from the perspective of Indian Christian communities, especially those shaped by the colonial missionary influence, the rigid Western interpretation of gender and sexuality was adopted. However, it's important to remember that earlier Christian in India, like Syriac Christians, Saint Thomas focused traditions in Kerala, coexisted peacefully within Indian pluralistic culture for centuries before the colonial ideology was imposed. And so these communities were often shaped by more local customs than by the imported doctrine that came from outside. And I also want to mention a very important fact that today queer and trans South Asians are reclaiming spaces with their faith, their traditions, and drawing a value of dignity, justice, and inclusion. Even today, much of the South Asian diaspora continues to grapple with these colonial inheritances, and which have basically deeply influenced the societal attitudes toward gender and sexuality. So, reclaiming pre colonial understanding of gender diversity is not only an act of historical accuracy, but it's also an act of resistance, cultural restoration, and another type of truth and reconciliation for the impact of colonization in South Asia. I did promise you all that we will talk more about trans identities. So, and trans is also an umbrella term. Like I mentioned, queer being an umbrella term, and they're like that includes anyone whose gender identities differed from the sex assigned at the time of the birth. And within these umbrella terms lies another spectrum of identities known as non-binary, which refers to the people who don't exclusively identify as male or female, and this identity of is itself a diverse and inclusive umbrella of its own that reflects the fluid and personal nature of gender beyond the binaries. And like some of the common terms you will hear is gender fluid, bigender, polygender, or agender. And there are many others and these identities are not rigid categories, but they're evolving uh, like by different ideologies. Also, it's shaped by how a person wants to self-define themselves. And as language is growing and changing, it's crucial to understand the chosen labels and pronouns to create a space for them to define their gender on their own terms. Now, I talked about pronouns, and I'm sure you must have noticed that when I was introducing myself, I used my pronouns uh, to identify myself. Uh, and also, like this practice is becoming more and more common because pronouns are a basic part of how we respect someone's identity, just like using their correct name. I'm sure all of us here may have experienced that challenge of someone mispronouncing our name multiple times without even trying to, make a, you know, honest attempt in learning our name. And name is very personal. So are the pronouns. So it's very important for us using the right pronouns to affirm a person's gender and help create a safer, more inclusive environment. So while many people use he, him, or she, her, others may use they, them, which is widely accepted gender neutral pronoun in English. And even it's used historically when a person gender is unknown, like someone left their bag here, uh, or someone uh, left their or someone uh, has been doing something that you are not sure about the gender. You will always use they and them. uh, And some individuals may also use the neopronouns like they, their, or others which may be unfamiliar, but they are just as valid. So you don't need to uh, understand, or you don't need to have a degree in English linguistics to use pronouns respectfully. Just a willingness to listen whenever it's the right time to ask and adapt and induced and the first step in recognizing and respecting pronouns is uh, using our pronouns ourselves, like normalizing the usage of pronouns. And this practice signals to others that you are mindful of gender diversity. You are mindful, many times, especially when we talk about and I will talk quickly about newcomers experiences. When somebody is coming from other parts of the world to Canada, and they're meeting someone who's from their community, they're really afraid that, oh, I might get outed in this process. So they're now trying to hide themselves, which is like a reason why they wanted to, in some cases, want to leave their home country and move to a country more acceptable to their identities. So the first step for us could be, as social workers, um, is that, like, recognizing by saying that, like, hi, my name is like, I'm going to use Siju's example. Hi, my name is Siju and my pronouns are he, him. uh, Now, for probably for Siju, it's not a big deal, but for somebody who has a different idea of gender identity, this is a very clear message that, oh my god, this person, this social worker, understands the gender diversity. I am safe around him, and that is very important. And there are many other tips for trans inclusion in practice, especially for the social workers. I'm going to move to the next slide about that. So, as social worker, one of the most tangible way we can support the trans and gender diverse individuals is by integrating affirming practice into our daily work. I said using pronouns is important, and like some of the tips I want to talk about, always use the term transgender as an adjective, not as a noun. Just like we wouldn't say a disabled person, like we will say person with a disability. We would not be using the term, like, um, transgendered person. So, like, say uh, transgender person, or don't say transgender. So, like, remembering that transitioning, uh, the term transgender is an adjective, not a noun, which means that by this definition, like a tall male, a short male, a South Asian male, a Canadian male, and a trans male are all male, regardless of what was added to their male identity at the beginning. And then respecting and using person's current name and pronouns. So even when discussing their past, especially if you know somebody has transitioned, you know them from the early year times before they're transitioning, use their current gender identity. Use their current pronouns. Like, if I know somebody who identified as female a few years ago, but they transitioned and identifies as male, uh, I'm talking about the time when they were identifying as female. I will still use their male pronouns. So that is very important, and this reinforces their identity and avoids the re-traumatization of someone by misgendering them. Also, another important element is avoid dead naming, which means referring to someone by their former name given at the time of their birth. And because it can be incredibly painful and invalidating in some cases. Like, very recently, I was meeting an old acquaintance. And I knew that they have transitioned, and I did not know their real name, now their present name. I just avoided to even introduce them with their previous name. I just introduced the other person that was present, like, meet so and so, and then I waited for them to disclose their name, rather than, like, usually when you're introducing two people, you would say, like, hi, hi, A meets B, hi, B meets A. But I just stopped at introducing the person A and waited for person B to use their own name. Because in trans community, the old name is considered a dead name, and it's like, basically, you are you need to be very careful with that. And also ask, don't assume. if you're unsure about someone's pronouns, it's okay to politely ask, or better, like I said, normalize it by offering your own. And like another important thing that about asking is, don't ask about people's surgery or medical histories unless it's necessary for your work and with consent. So a person's transitioning journey is private, and they should never be required to prove their gender identity in any circumstances. Um, some more tips that I want to also share is like be mindful of your forms and documentations, like making sure forms offer more than just male or female. It could include a space for people to write their gender. Like I suggest, like just leave it blank, like don't put boxes like or female, whatever is comfortable, right? Because there's another thing that when you write male, female, and other, that also sorts of create an exclusionary approach. So like the best bet for us is like just putting a dash or a blank space for people to write their gender and share their chosen name and pronouns. Also, like I've seen this practice very commonly used now, that in the forms, yes, we are required to put legal name, but you can also put a chosen name. And if you have, like, if you're using a system to record data and information, and if there is no way for you to put the chosen name which is different from the legal name,
Hello.
like you can write in your notes that so and so person prefers this name.
അതെ.
um, and acknowledging the systemic barriers is also very important, because many trans people face discrimination in healthcare systems, housing, education, employment, and as social workers, you play a key role in recognizing and addressing these barriers, and like through advocacy and structural changes. And you are already doing it by attending this session this morning, but educate yourself on continuous basis, because language, identities, and best practices, they're evolving. Like I said, like the acronym is evolving. Seek out like trusted resources, and don't rely solely on a trans client to educate you. In fact, don't rely at all on your trans clients to educate you, because not everyone who is from uh, uh, gender or sexual diverse identities wants to be your educator or your trainer or your teacher. Um, and also, creating visible affirming spaces is important. This could mean having inclusive signage, trans affirming pamphlets, or the pronouns in your email signature, or your pronouns in your name tag if you're wearing one. So these visual cues go a long way in helping people feel safe. Finally, like try and model inclusive behavior. If you hear a transphobic joke or misgendering in your place, address it respectfully. Even if the trans person, like there's no trans person around, inclusion needs to be more proactive. It should not be reactive in many ways. But also, mistake can happen. It's okay to make a mistake. We all do. What matters is how we respond to it. Like being corrected doesn't mean you are a bad person, and it actually means someone is trusting you enough to offer a learning moment. So in my work, like Siju earlier mentioned, that I used to work with City of Kingston, and even before that, like in my public roles, um, a lot of criticism and a lot of correction used to happen. And I would always take it positively that this person trusts my office or my organization. That's why they're complaining. Because the moment people stop trusting you, they stop complaining. I would be more worried when people are not coming to me and telling me like what is not happening right, because that means they have given up on me. They don't believe that anything that I can do is going to change anything for them. And also, it's okay to feel uncomfortable or even embarrassed at first. That's the part of growth. What's not okay is to dismiss, justify, or repeat the harm once you have been made aware of. Uh, Growth actually happens when we choose humility over defensiveness and actions over excuses. So, inclusive work, perfection is not the goal. You all know that already. So, progress, empathy, and accountability are the real goals. So, when somebody criticize you or call you out, listen, apologize, and act differently going forward. I always say that like once it's a mistake, twice it's a mistake, third time maybe it's a mistake. But now you are crossing over to a place where you are not respecting someone's gender identity, and misgendering someone on frequent basis and deliberately in Canada is, by the way, I'm sure all of you are aware, is criminalized. With Bill C-16, gender expression is also federally considered, and in most of the provinces and territories, gender identity is a protected category under human rights codes and legislation. Now, I want to switch gears to a little bit towards a very important topic of understanding the two spirit identities. I also want to recognize that I'm not an indigenous person. I am an immigrant uh, to the indigenous land, and whatever I'm going to present in this slide is something that I have learned from different indigenous two spirit elders over the period of my work and practice. So, without further ado, I want to just share this term, the two spirit. It's basically a sacred cultural identity which is rooted in many North American indigenous cultures. And it reflects a person who carries both masculine and feminine spirits, and whose identity may encompass aspects of sexuality, gender, and even spirituality. Though it's not limited to any single definition, it's important to understand that this is a non Western LGBTQ plus term, but a very distinct indigenous concept with deep spiritual and cultural meaning. And historically, two spirit people were revered and respected in their communities. They often served as healers, knowledge keepers, ceremonial leaders, matchmakers, and colonization and residential schools. And imposed gender binaries have led to the suppression of two spirit roles and identities. But these teachings and people have never disappeared. However, this term two spirit itself was coined in 1990 in Manitoba during the third annual Intertribal Native American, First Nations, Gay and Lesbian American Conference as a unifying term across diverse nations. Um, but I also want to recognize that each nation may still have its own language and roles and teachings related to gender diverse people. And this understanding, like I said, does not come from me, but from the wisdom generously shared by Two Spirits Elder. I still especially want to recognize Two Spirit people of Manitoba for sharing some of this knowledge. And one thing that I would also tell you that not every indigenous person who's to SLGB, like LGBTQAI plus identity uh, may identify as two spirit for two major reasons. In some indigenous communities, anyone who's indigenous and LGBTQ can identify as two spirit. But in certain First Nations, it's a title that needs to be given to you. Somebody has to give it to you. An elder has to tell you that you are a two spirit person for you to assume that title. And also, we need to understand that some individuals want to stick to their native languages terminologies rather than this English term, which is, as I said, was coined in 1990. Um, Very quickly, I'm going to move to the two remaining parts of the bred person, which is like gender expression, which refers to how someone externally present their gender through clothing, hairstyle, body, language, voice, and overall appearance. Like while many people express their gender in a way that aligns with social norms, others may choose to have a historically different expression that are fluid, expensive, or culturally specific. Importantly, gender expression is not the same as gender identity or sexual orientation. It's about how we show up in the world, not who we are internally on or who we love. What is considered masculine and feminine is deeply shaped by culture, history, and geography, and definitions that varies widely. Like especially for like I know from my personal experience now that Malayali men traditionally wears munda, which is a draped garment similar to what would be considered a skirt in this part of the world, like flowing garment. Um, uh, it's and I know that this is seen as a dignified and masculine sign within Kerala's cultural context. but it could be seen as a different thing from a different cultural perspective. Same is with the Middle Eastern cultures, like flowing garments like thobe for men and abaya for women. They reflect modesty and cultural identity, and not necessarily, like it's gender conformity. Also, in many African cultures, we see like bright, vibrant colors and lots of beadwork, which is very much used all across different gender identities. And it could be seen as a feminine or masculine based on wherever you are, whichever culture you are coming from and you're taking your information from. Also, like, long hair in some cultures is masculine, some cultures is feminine. Like in ancient Japanese scriptures, um, a thick braid is very much associated with the strong masculine warriors, and same is the case with indigenous identities. So what I'm trying to say is, like, gender expression cannot be defined by individuals or by any kind of like generalization. Everyone has their own way of expressing their gender, and like, if this what I'm wearing right now makes me feel more masculine, that is my masculine gender expression. um, so assumption or avoiding assumption is important in this case. And last but not least, I want to talk about the sexual orientation, which refers to persons, not just sexual attraction, but emotional and romantic attraction to others. This may include attraction to people of opposite genders, like heterosexuals, and the same gender, where like the gay and lesbians and other identities will come, and more than one gender, like bisexual or pansexual, or no sexual attraction, like asexual or fluid identities would also come. Importantly, sexual orientation is very much separate from gender identity. It's about who you are attracted to, and like I said, not just sexually, but it could be emotionally or romantically as well. uh, and not who you are. Although these like terms like gay and lesbian may seem very modern or Western, same gender love, I've already explained that, like, it has been existing in ancient Indian texts and art, like, Kama Sutra, Sufi poetry, and also the temple carvings at Madhya Pradesh and Odisha reflects a wide spectrum of sexual expressions, including same-sex and non-binary representations. So I'm not gonna beat the dead horse of Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code anymore, um, but I also want to recognize that, like, these laws and colonial attitudes have actually casted a long shadow, and many of us from the South Asian diaspora still struggle with the reconciliation of inherited norms with more inclusive ancestral traditions that are there, and understanding the deep cultural and spiritual roots of diverse sexual orientation will help us challenge the harmful myth of queerness as a foreign or a modern terminology. In fact, from South Asian perspective, it's very indigenous, ancient, and profoundly human in many ways. But it's not the same as gender identity. Some of the common myths that I've heard over the period of my like practice and my work is like, it's just a phase. People, especially youth, will grow out of it. Uh, but it's not the case. While some people may explore and evolve in how they identify, that does not mean that identity is temporary or less real. It means they are learning and living authentically. Also, I've already addressed being LGBTQAI is a modern concept or a Western concept, and you can not be LGBTQAI and religious. Many queer individuals are deeply spiritual and religious. And in fact, like I mentioned, that pre-colonial societies often included gender diverse people in spiritual roles. Um, and also, another one that I love sharing is that they're just confused or seeking attention. So this stereotype is dismissive and invalidating. People have themselves better than we give them credit for. And the only confusion often comes from being forced to hide and who they are due to the society's pressure or fear of being judged. Um, I know we are coming to the top of the hour, and I would quickly want to like talk one more thing, especially from the intersectionality perspective, to which will help us understand that no identities exist in isolation, especially if you're talking about an LGBTQ Malayali person. They may be navigating issues of racialization, caste or class system, family pressure, religious expectation, and on immigration and socioeconomic systems as well. So we must hold all these identities in our practice. Inclusion means seeing the whole person, not just a label. You cannot say, like, today show up as just a Malayali, today show up as just a good Christian, today show up as a queer person. It's a whole package. And when we see it from the immigrations lens, the LGBTQAI plus immigrants and newcomers often face unique challenges that are shaped by a combination of cultural stigma, xenophobia, and legal fear and trauma from their countries of origin, which can be re traumatized by some of our non inclusive practices. And many come from regions where being queer and trans is heavily stigmatized, if not criminalized. So in Canada, while legal protection may exist, the reality includes navigating racism, language barriers, and social isolation in many ways. So, which can also make like accessing support system feels unsafe or out of reach. I know a lot of people who would be uncomfortable seeing somebody of their own community, or their same ethnicity or religious background for this very reason. They're afraid that they're going to be judged. So, without a culturally safe and trauma informed services, these individuals may feel increased vulnerability to, employment discrimination, mental health crisis, housing instability. As social workers, it's crucial that we recognize these layers of experiences and create spaces where people feel seen, respected, and protected. And if we are not doing that, uh, like, we are actually missing out. We are creating a space where there's going to be um, a lot of oversight, and these barriers can lead to worsen mental health, like disconnection from the needed services. And it's for social workers, it's you all know already that it's ethical responsibility to ensure that inclusion is not just a value but a daily practice. Even I sometimes when I'm talking to individuals and they ask this question, like, but what about my personal beliefs? It's not about us in that moment. It's about the person we are working with. When you are a social worker, when you're wearing the social worker's hat, it's not about you anymore. It's about the client you're working with. But how can you be more inclusive? So here are some of the quick things that I'm going to recap. I've already talked about them. Ask for and respect pronouns. And don't assume heteronormativity or gender binaries. Avoid assumptions. Say big no to assumptions. And use intake form that allows spaces for diverse identities. Also, create safer spaces in your offices, on your programming, and refer to affirming resources. One resource that I always recommend for individuals from South Asian background in Ontario is ASAP, is Association for South Asians um, Support Services, and I'm going to share those links with Ashish for all of us to look at, uh, and also refer to supporting small changes like this change. Like 1 hour will never justify such a big topic, but like taking the first step is important. So, on that note, I'm going to thank you all for being here this morning and for listening with open mind and for engaging in what can sometimes be difficult but also very important conversation. Inclusion isn't a destination, it's a continuous learning journey. Uh, we are all growing, unlearning, and evolving together. So, thank you very much for your presence. And I think now the floor is open for any questions or comments if you have any. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, for such a powerful. You enacted a feminine side by adorning a woman's necklace and owning it in the most feminine way. This has sparked a lot of conversation and in a very positive way. So, this was very recent, so I just was thinking about this while you were explaining gender expressions. So now I want to talk a little bit more about your session, which was very enlightening. Your perspective clarifying to SLGBTQIA plus terminology and respectful language were incredibly valuable. You have helped us understand the difference between sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. Also, you have helped us, all of us, in debunking some common myths and stereotypes when it comes to 2SLGBTQIA plus identities. You have well explained how intersecting identities like race, religion, migration, and cultural influence lived experiences of 2SLGBTQIA plus identities in our society is influenced. Also, unpacking and understanding of the systemic challenges that 2SLGBTQIA plus identities face and the role we as social workers, allies, and community members can play in advocating for equity and justice. On behalf of the entire MASWO team and everyone present here today, we sincerely thank you for sharing your time, your expertise, and your heart with us. We are truly grateful. Thank you, Mohammed. Now, the floor is open for question and answer sessions. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or raise your hand and we can go ahead.